So this is the iPhone 12, the phone I've been using almost exclusively as my daily driver over the last 6 months, and during this time period, I've really got to know this phone. So, how's this phone been, and would I recommend it 6 months later? Let's find out. Okay, so first off, as usual, we're going to be talking about the specs. The iPhone 12 is rocking an Apple A14 Bionic processor, which is actually the same as on the more expensive flagship 12 Pro, so this is a nice to have. The iPhone 12 also features 4GB of RAM, which is a nice to see as always, and we're going to be talking in a little bit more detail later on about how this actually affects the performance. In terms of storage, the iPhone 12 is available in either 64, 128, or 256GB of storage, which I personally really like, as I don't really think the largest storage options, that 512GB that you can get on the Pro models, don't really think that's all that useful for most people. So I think that it maxing out at 256GB really isn't that big of an issue. I personally, as always, have the 64GB variant, but say you play a lot of games or just need that extra space, then it is nice to know that you can upgrade if you want to. Following this, the iPhone 12 weighs in at 164 grams, which is actually pretty light, especially considering the fact that the same screen-sized iPhone 11 actually weighed in at 194 grams, so it is nice to see this lighter weight, and to be honest, during my time using this, I have noticed it. In terms of colors, like the iPhone 11 that came before, there are multiple color options including black, white, red, green, and that brand new blue color, which I personally did want but couldn't get. Me personally, as you can see, I got the white color, mainly because it was the only one I could get at the time, but it's actually kind of grown on me, I'm not gonna lie. The white back with the silver trimmings really does look nice in my opinion, and so as I said, while I did initially want that blue one, kind of glad I got this one. As for the specs, that's pretty much it. I tend not to focus too much on specs when I'm talking about iPhones because, as always, a lot of it is down to the software performance, which we are going to be talking about in a little bit, but those are the key specs you should be aware of. Next up, we have the build quality. This is a modern release from Apple, so it has a glass back, and while there are definitely pros and cons to this, I personally do think the pros outweigh the cons. Obviously, it feels amazing. The glass body combined with the new shape, which we are going to be talking about in a bit, just feels as premium as ever. It looks nice, feels nice, and is an overall great experience. That said though, this obviously does increase the overall breakability of the phone, but there is a secret weapon with the iPhone 12. With this generation of iPhones, Apple have actually added a new technology known as ceramic shield, which, Apple claim, provides up to 4 times better drop resistance when compared to previous iPhones, while still making clear optical performance and, in general, better scratch resistance. From what I've read, it's essentially small ceramic nanocrystals that have been embedded to the glass matrix using a high-temperature crystallization manufacturing process. Oh, that was a lot. I read that directly off the script, by the way. I can't remember all of that. Anyway, how does it perform? Okay, so throughout my time using this phone, mostly without a case or a screen protector, my iPhone 12 has stayed completely scratch-free, and I'm a lot more confident using this phone without a case than I am with something like an iPhone 11 Pro. That said, as always, I would still recommend a case. The ceramic shield is not going to be as protective as a good phone case, so making sure that your phone is protected is something that you should probably keep in mind. Of course, it's a modern iPhone, so we do get an IP68 dust and water resistance rating, and I've actually read this phone can survive in up to 6 meters of water for 30 minutes, which is pretty decent. During my time using this phone, I have purposefully got it wet plenty of times, and it's still working, so that's good. Overall, in terms of build quality, it's pretty much what we'd expect. Nice and premium with that expected bumping quality, but it's still not quite enough for me to recommend using this phone without a case. Unless you're very careful or have Apple Care. Up next, we have the screen. Considering this is the successor to the iPhone 11, it actually got a pretty decent upgrade here. The iPhone 12 features a 6.1-inch Super Retina XDR OLED panel with a resolution of 1170 by 2532, and I personally think this is one of the definitive highlights of the iPhone 12. It has a typical peak brightness of 625 nits. However, due to the fact that it's also HDR10 certified, in this mode, it can reach a peak brightness of 1200 nits. It also has a PPI of 460, Dolby Vision, and all of this is outstanding. From the moment I started using it, I was very impressed with how sharp it is. It's been crystal clear even on the brightest days that I've used this thing, and I've never really found myself wanting more, other than maybe like a higher refresh rate. Of course, it's a modern iPhone, so it has True Tone as well as haptic touch. True Tone's been fantastic for a few years now, and while I was hesitant to leave 3D touch for haptic touch, I've got to say, the iPhone 12 has got me comfortable with it now, so while still in my heart, I do prefer 3D touch. I think the iPhone 12 is good enough to not really make a difference. So yeah, overall, the screen on the iPhone 12 is pretty phenomenal in my opinion. It's nice and bright, a pretty great size, and all the features work well, so if you're okay with just using a 60Hz screen like I am, then it's pretty difficult to find anything wrong with it. Up next, we have the button layout, which, to be honest, hasn't really changed all that much since the start of the notched iPhone line. However, there was one pretty sharp difference with the iPhone 12. Get it? Because we're going to talk about it now. Compared to the iPhone 11, the iPhone 12 now features a squared-off design almost reminiscent of the 5S, which I personally really like for more than aesthetics. As I said in the past, I'm someone who could never quite get to grips with 6.1-inch iPhones. That said, I found due to the squared-off design, not only does it feel more premium, but it also feels a lot more grippy, and I've only actually dropped this phone a handful of times, which, if you're a regular, you'll know that's pretty rare for me. If it helps me drop my phone less, I'm pretty pleased with the change in design. Other than that though, it's a 2017 plus iPhone, so it's pretty much what you'd expect. Nice big isolated lock button, separate volume up and down buttons, a mute switch, all that good stuff. And yeah, I can't really complain about the button layout here. Next up, we're talking Face ID. If you never used it before, basically it was always pretty good on the iPhone side of things, especially with the release of iOS 13, and as long as you could show your face, it would tend to unlock pretty quickly. On the iPhone 11, however, you could unlock your phone from all angles, and I generally found it to be significantly more accurate, as well as significantly faster than with previous generations. To be honest, not a lot has changed here, but as I said, the iPhone 11 was just so impressive when it came to the Face ID. So yeah, not really complaining, but I can't help but want a secondary biometrics unlock method. Maybe like on the iPad Air with that fingerprint scanner on the lock button. That would have definitely been nice. But yeah, overall, I think the Face ID system on the iPhone 12 is fantastic. And due to it being able to unlock from all angles, I would say this is definitely a usable Face ID system. So now we're going to be talking about an especially important part of the modern smartphone experience: the camera. While it may not look like much has changed on the surface from the iPhone 11, there were actually some pretty significant changes under the hood. But first of all, let's go over the specs. So the iPhone 12 features this dual camera system that we've seen before. It looks similar to the one on the iPhone 11. Again, we got a 12 megapixel f1.6 wide angle camera and another 12 megapixel f2.4 ultra wide camera. The selfie camera seems to look about the same as the iPhone 11 with a 12 megapixel f2.2 front facing camera. However, there have been some nice features added, and we are going to be talking about that in a minute. After using the iPhone 11 Pro for a while, I have come to miss the telephoto lens, but does the performance make up for it? Let's find out. In terms of actual photo performance, I've been pretty impressed with the iPhone 12 so far. Thanks to some new processing, photos look sharper with a nice level of saturation and the best dynamic range I've ever seen out of a phone. Me personally, I do still quite like that ultra-wide camera for some unique angles. However, if you do want to get the best optical performance at your phone, I would personally recommend using the wide angle, as I still have found a little bit of slight distortion around the edges when using that ultra-wide lens. But for the most part, out the camera photos from this phone look absolutely great. With night mode, it has of course been brought over to all the cameras now, and in my full testing of the camera, it does still seem to function best on the wide angle. I have noticed it to be overall better than it was on the iPhone 11 with nicer colors and all in all better low light performance. The technology also just seems a little bit more refined, and I've been able to pull off some amazing looking night shots. Of course, the portrait mode is here too, and again, I do feel like it's been slightly refined. The blurry background does now seem to look a little bit more organic, whereas you would occasionally get those jagged edges on previous iPhones, and while they're not completely gone, they do seem to be few and far between nowadays. It does unfortunately only work on the wide angle and the front-facing camera, and while it would have been kind of pointless on the ultra-wide, it would have been nice all the same. Now we get onto some really exciting changes, specifically with the video. Not only can you shoot up to 4K 60 FPS with some of the best stabilization I've ever seen, you can also, at least up to 30 FPS, get Dolby Vision HDR. With this, you get more dynamic range at your videos, and I always like to see this. I mean, who doesn't like dynamic range? Overall, really impressive. Of course, you again get slow motion video up to 240 FPS and 1080p, and while it still isn't the best quality, it's certainly an improvement from when this technology was first introduced, and absolutely fine for any fun home slow motion. Also, the slow fees are still here, which work fine. Still haven't found a use for them yet though, even after 6 months. Overall, the camera on the iPhone 12 just feels nice and refined. The awesome dynamic range and sharpness in photo mode combined with the great video makes this a fantastic portable camera. And while I do still miss the telephoto, I think for most people, this camera will be pretty much perfect. In terms of performance, which is, in my opinion, the most important aspect of any modern smartphone, the iPhone 12 really doesn't disappoint. Scrolling through the OS, opening up apps, and using secondary interactions are all seamless, and the overall OS performance on the iPhone 12 is pretty much as good as it's gonna get. The iPhone 12 is shipped with iOS 14, and seeing this is a new phone, it's pretty much guaranteed to get at least 5 more years of support, so don't really need to consider if it's going anywhere anytime soon. And this is nice because it's not exactly cheap at around $700. In terms of more intensive performance, streaming video and playing games has been an absolute breeze on this phone. I never have any issues with lag in games, nor do I have any issues streaming videos. It just works, and thanks to the A14 processor, this is likely to be the case for a very long time. In my usage, I've never found myself wanting more. I mean, occasionally, maybe a higher refresh rate screen when gaming, and the fact that this phone is 5G ready, once that infrastructure all gets set up, it's only going to get better. Next up, we have the speakers. Now, to be honest, I haven't really noticed a huge difference coming from the iPhone 11 Pro. However, if you've seen my iPhone 11 Pro review, then you'll know I really like the speakers on that phone. I found they were nice and loud with a good full sound, and obviously they're not going to be as good as dedicated speakers or a pair of good headphones. However, for casual listening, they're pretty great. Whenever I'm watching a video or listening to some music, I never find myself reaching for my studio monitors. That would be kind of overkill as it is, but anyway, sound quality is good enough not to be distracting, and I personally think that's what's important. Finally, we're talking battery life. In terms of specs, the iPhone 12 features a 2,850 milliamp hour battery, which can be charged wired, wireless, or with that new MagSafe charger, which I still haven't tried yet. 6 months later. Honestly, at this point, I don't really know if I ever will. I mean, wired charging works totally fine for me, but it is still nice that this is an option. Okay, so this is all good, but how's the actual battery life? Well, to be totally honest, I was a little bit skeptical earlier on. I mean, it was smaller than on the 11 with a better screen, so kind of concerned for the battery life, but I'm pleased to say I was actually pleasantly surprised. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not quite as good as the 11 Pro, but I usually get through the day comfortably with my iPhone 12, and I only really ever have to plug it in during the evenings. For most people who aren't away from their chargers for more than a day, the iPhone 12 battery life should be totally fine. All right, so all these things considered, what do I think of the iPhone 12 6 months later? Well, when I first bought it and unboxed it, I said that the iPhone 12 was probably the phone that most people should buy. While it is $700, you are going to be getting a phone that lasts with a great screen, a fantastic camera, and it's even 5G ready. So once that gets properly rolled out, this is going to be a pretty awesome phone. So if you want to buy a new phone in 2021, I would strongly recommend considering the iPhone 12. All right, guys, so that's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed this one. Let me know, by the way, what you think of the iPhone 12. Do you think this is the one to buy, or the Mini, or the Pro? Always like reading your comments, but as for now, as always, thank you for watching. Remember to like the video if you want to see more content like this, and smash that subscribe button. I'm done for now, and I will see you guys in the next one.